the coordinating editor of Latin American Perspectives. She has a PhD in economic history from University of Sao Paulo and worked as a visiting PhD scholar at the University of California, Irvine, UCI. She has a master's degree in economic development at the State University of Campinas, UNICAMP. She has published many books and articles about the history of agrarian reform in Latin America, amongst others, agrarian history of the Cuban Revolution, dilemmas of peripheral socialism. This was in 2023. Prof, I can't read Spanish. I'm not gonna try that, but it is Historia Agraria in 2020, an article priced by the Spanish Association of Contemporary History. Thank you so much for your presence here. We're looking forward to your excellent contribution. We are excited and thank you for gracing us this afternoon. Well, at least in South Africa, it's afternoon. I'm sorry that I'm assuming that we're on the same time zone. So we're looking forward, Prof, to your input. Colleagues, allow me to also welcome Prof. Victor Mbengwa. He has also given us his brief bio. Professor Victor Mbengwa, colleagues, is a seasoned agricultural economist with extensive expertise in land reform, rural development, and agricultural marketing. He holds a PhD in agricultural economics and a doctorate in business leadership, combining academic depth with practical leadership. Prof. Mbengwa has played a critical role in shaping and implementing land reform strategies aimed at empowering previously disadvantaged communities in South Africa. His work has focused on facilitating equitable land redistribution, supporting post-settlement farmer development, and promoting sustainable land use practices. As a former manager at the National Agricultural Marketing Council, NAMAC, he led initiatives to enhance the market access for smallholder farmers, particularly land reform beneficiaries. In addition to his policy work, he is founding director of DFAS Center, which provides training and mentorship to small-scale farmers transitioning into commercial agriculture. His contributions have significantly influenced the national discourse on land reform and agricultural transformation. Prof, our esteemed colleague, we thank you so much for your presence. And we're looking forward to hearing from your insights in this important conversation this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, we've got our own colleague as well, Dr. Ponya, that I have a pleasure in meeting several times. In this Brics platform, actually, I think this is the platform where we met. He holds a Bachelor of Agricultural Management from the University of Free State in South Africa and a PhD on Environmental and Agriculture at the University of South Africa. He did his postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Johannesburg, where he's a research associate for more than 15 years, so teaching there, doing research and project management. He has supervised masters and PhDs and published 2 books, and he's made over 30 peer-reviewed conference proceedings. He is currently employed at the Agricultural Research Council as a senior researcher. He also works on smallholder farmer and enterprise development and serving as an agroforestry expert by Nature in Amsterdam, Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. He's Brics book, colleagues, that he has edited speaks of agroforestry adoption cases from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It was published by Springer in Switzerland. I'm going to leave it there and just welcome my esteemed colleague, Dr. Maponya. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to your contribution this day and your insights. Colleagues, I have the very last speaker to contribute to read out the CV. It's a very long CV. I don't know why Zama is doing this to me. I'm introducing Prof. Netswara, that colleagues you all know. He's currently the Executive Dean in the Faculty of Management Sciences at the Durban University of Technology here in South Africa, and has been tasked as well to develop a business school there. And he's worked as a director at Northwest University's Business School, as a deputy dean at the Faculty of Management Sciences at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. Also worked as a director at South Africa's Brics think tank, and the director at the Teflop Graduate School. So he also worked, colleagues, as a researcher in a number of institutions and served on a number of boards, including the Human Sciences Research Council's board, the Pick It Up board, the SAPSA board, the South African Business School Association board, and is active in research adjudication at a national and international level in South Africa in particular, and Uganda and UK, as well as the Netherlands. Without any further ado, colleagues, I want to thank all of you for this wonderful opportunity. And looking forward to this conversation. I'm going to have a flashing meeting right at the end, and if I'm not here, Prof. Netswara will take over, but I'm much likely to come back. If I'm not, I will communicate, but I'm going to allow Prof. Netswara colleagues to do a quick introductory welcome and focus on the business of today. Prof. Netswara?
Thank you very much, Professor Paho. I hope I'm audible and also visible, because when you were talking, I could hear now and again that the connectivity was not so very good, but I hope it is not coming from my side. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
You just look a little bit spooky, but other than that, everything is fine.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. Let's proceed. Colleagues, you have been welcomed, but I thought it is important that I make some remarks which I believe would be equally very central to the discussion of the day. Specifically talking about the question of land. The land question worldwide is the most important question above all other matters. There is no question globally that precedes the question of land ownership. Everything that happens on this earth, whether it's mining, whether it's agriculture, whether it's housing, it's premised on the availability of land, on the provision of land. Even water resources are based on land use. So there are serious question marks about who owns land and who uses what land for what particular purposes and reason. So as you would have seen, those of you who are familiar with the work of Malcolm X, this I thought was quite profound. And this is coming from his speech of the late 1960s, indicating that land is the basis for all independence. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality. And indeed, I believe this quotation is 100% spot on, because without land, there is nothing that we can do on this land. So when the African National was founded in 1912, its basis was the question of land. It was in lieu of the Land Act of 1930, where the British Empire took over all of land of South Africa and left Black people to the reserves of 7%. And the chiefs, the preachermen of this land, and some intellectuals came together. And they said, since we do not have land anymore, we should petition the government of Britain. So they established in 2012 the African National Congress in response to the question of land. So without land being seized away from the Black people, chances are that we may not have had the formation or establishment of the African National Congress, because the basis was land. Fast forward to 1955, members of Society of South Africa, led by the ANC and many other organizations, met in Johannesburg in Kliptown to discuss the question of the freedom of Black people. And if you read this freedom charter that they had put together, you will see that the question of land is among the foremost priorities in as far as the freedoms and rights of the Black people is concerned. Whether we are talking about land in Kenya and the rise of the Mau Mau, whether we are talking about the land in Zimbabwe, whether we are talking about land in Nigeria, or whether we are talking about land in India. There are important question marks. In actual fact, colonialism itself was premised on land rights, land dispossession. Without land, without its riches in minerals, there wouldn't have been colonialism at all. There would have been no need. So if we fast forward from 1913, specifically in South Africa, you will see that land ownership patterns remain extremely skewed. Black people of South Africa today, according to the land audit that was carried out a few years ago, I don't think that land audit is older than 2010, suggests that Black people own only 7% of South African land. And you can see the state itself owns only 14% of South African land, and 79% remains in private ownership. In as far as race-based ownership is concerned, 72% of South African land remain in white hands. What does that imply? It implies that since 1994, when Black people thought they found freedom, they actually have not found much more than ability to vote for politicians. Because recall, the ANC was established for what reason? In order to deal with the question of land. And fast forward to 2025, Black people still do not have land. It means that Black people are food insecure. They cannot be proud that they can produce food for themselves. These are the land ownership patterns. I've already alluded to 72% of the land being in white hands. So these are very critical issues that age. And I think this debate should continue unabated until we find a lasting solution to the question of land ownership in South Africa. not only in South Africa, equally in Kenya. If you look at who produces in Kenya, who owns the land in Kenya, and who is responsible for the coffee and the tea plantations there, you will see that they are not in black hands. They are either Western corporates or they are white private individuals who are responsible for that. The upheaval in West Africa, in the Sahel states, is a question of land ownership and land rights, because the French have continued to monopolize land and to render the people of those countries, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Mali, they've rendered them irrelevant in the land of their birth. Hence, all that upheaval that is happening there. Recently, a group of Afrikaners in South Africa have decided that they will go to the White House to report black people, black government, because it intends to address the question of land. And these are the guys belonging to an organization called AfriForum, who went to the White House in the US, and they said, black people want to take our land back. They want to take our land away. And I think these are individuals who are definitely misguided, extremely misguided, because if we do not address this particular question, chances are that in the near future, what has happened in Zimbabwe will happen. It will happen multi-fold, and the consequences will be devastating. The bottom line is that if we do not deal with the question of land ownership, we're going to have a disaster. We already have a disaster in our hands, and we are ignoring it. And this disaster has got to be addressed. Will it be our generation who address this, or will it be future generations who must address this particular question? Ultimately, it has to be addressed. So, Professor Paho, let me stop my talk here, even though I've concentrated mainly on the problem of South Africa. The articulation of this problem, as you have heard, resonate with the Kenyans, resonate with Western African countries, resonate with Zimbabwe and everybody else, especially also the DRC. As you see, all of those wars happening in the Eastern DRC, it is a question of land, a question of the ownership of the means of production in that part of Africa. Prof. Paho, over to you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Prof, for such an insightful, detailed presentation. Colleagues, I invite you to write your questions down so that we're able to consolidate this towards the end. And I'm also going to try and be a bit strict to the speakers to make sure that they spend not more than 10 minutes in their presentation, so that we spend a lot of time taking questions and contributions from the participants. Thank you, Prof. Your talk was on the general land politics, addressing those important issues so that we are able to, scope the matter for this conversation today. Thank you. Colleagues, we're moving forward with speed. We want to welcome our dearest colleague, Professor Magombe. His talk is on the addressing land reform pitfalls within a Zimbabwean perspective. Prof, the floor is yours. Thank you for the time. We are excited and we're looking forward.
Thank you very much, Prof. Paho. And I want to thank Prof. Nisquera for preempting some of my pointers that I have here. And it's very good that the audience has been made aware of some of these things as well. What I'm going to focus on is largely what are the lessons that South Africa can learn from the Zimbabwean experience. But before I do that, I want to give a general overview of the land reform program in Zimbabwe. So at independence in 1980 in Zimbabwe, there was this expectation that land would be quickly and fairly redistributed. In fact, land was the key question, just like Prof. Alluded to. The land was the key question that caused the liberation struggle. During the liberation struggle, people were told that at independence, they would have access to land. But why was this the case? Why were people expecting land to be redistributed? This was because 6,000 farmers, about 6,000 farmers, owned 39% of Zimbabwe's land. And the majority of the population then was around 12 million, was crammed in the rural areas, which was about 22% of the land. The difference of that land being that the 39% that was owned by the white was fertile, it was in good rainfall areas, most of it, and the 22% that was farmed by the blacks was in marginal rainfall areas, and it was mostly sandy and infertile. Farm size in the rural area was around 2 hectares, but some had up to 5 hectares. My father, I grew up in a rural area. My father had 4 hectares and was considered in that area to be one of the people who had a lot of land. So the situation was expected to be redressed, and land reform at independence was drafted, just like the principles have been drafted here in South Africa. And it was based on willing buyer, willing seller basis. So farmers were supposed to sell their land, and the government was supposed to buy it using money given by the British government. But until 1998, land reform was very, very slow. Okay, so people became very impatient. And in 1998, around the Sose area, for those who are familiar with Zimbabwe, it is in around a town called Marondera. Around there, people started occupying white-owned land en masse at scale. And the government could not stop it, actually. So, because they couldn't stop it, in 2000, the government decided to give this program some semblance of government support. So there was a constitutional reform. The occupation of land was called Jambanja. I think some of you have heard that. Jambanja means indiscriminate, something that happens indiscriminately. So because of that, for 2 years, 1998 to 2000, in 2000, the government decided to give this program some semblance of acceptance. So there was a constitutional amendment called 16A, and this allowed expropriation of land from the white farmers, and compensation was only going to be given not for land, but for improvements on the land. In fact, if you had asked me to design that program, I wouldn't compensate for all of the improvements on the land because most of it was done by subsidy from the government. So probably I would have compensated for about half of it because a lot of it was not the farmers' effort. It was the government that was subsidizing it. So this led to the Fast Track Land Reform Program. This is called the Fast Track Land Reform Program. In that Fast Track Land Reform Program, by 2015, had redistributed 7 million hectares of land to just under 240,000 families. This meant that about 1 million Zimbabweans had access to land by that time, had access to land through this Fast Track Land Reform Program. But given that it was started by Jambanja, this Fast Track Land Reform Program was not very ordered. It included sometimes driving off farmers from the land. Some farmers got hurt, some farmers died. And in general, it didn't go in an orderly manner, although it did increase access to land. So this program had significant economic and social implications, including a decline in agricultural production. And some reports claim that there was widespread hunger and malnutrition, but some of it was actually caused by droughts that occurred during the same period. But definitely there was a decline in production. Now, given this background, what are the lessons that the South African Land Reform Program can learn from the Zimbabwean one? Of course, contextually, the South African program or problem is a little different because there's no foreign power that was colonizing South Africa. Zimbabwe was colonized by the British. Smith declared the independence. The British didn't do anything about that. So the foreign power came in and devised a conference where certain promises were made about land redistribution. But I want the South African program to note some of these observations. One, just like it is happening here in South Africa, during the period 1980 to 1998 when Jambanja started, the world looked at the unfairness that existed between the blacks and whites in terms of land redistribution and didn't say anything. But when the Jambanja started, there was a big outcry. So the South Africans should know that it is no longer possible to take shambokes, guns, and hanging ropes and drive the farmers off that land. It is no longer possible because it will lead to the isolation of the country. So this must be done legally. This transfer of land, if it is to be done, it must be done in such a way, in an orderly manner, in such a way that it doesn't cause the isolation that we see in Zimbabwe today. Secondly, land reform has two objectives. One, a political objective, which means just the transfer of land from one group to another. Second, an economic objective, which means that those people who benefit from the land redistribution
I give you
should
2
be
more
able,
minutes, Prof. Time is
should
your
be,
enemy.
should be able to enjoy the benefits of the economy that they should get the economic benefits. But this did not happen in Zimbabwe. Third, the willing buyer, willing seller basis that was used in Zimbabwe does not work, and Mr. Malema has always alluded to this. Fourth, it is possible to acquire the land with using expropriation, but there must be legal recourse. There must be, where there are disagreements, there must be a way to resolve the issue legally, not by using ropes and hanging ropes and guns and these things. That will lead to economic disaster. You saw the response of Trump to that visit that was alluded to by Prof. Neswera. They were already ready to give them visas to go there, although I don't think the Afrikaners want to go there, but he was already ready to give them. So the government must be careful in designing the land reform program. And then it is possible to acquire it by expropriation, like I said, and there are examples of it where it has happened and they can learn from it. In Scotland, for instance, there was expropriation and it was accepted. And finally, if land reform is slow, as was already alluded to, something will happen. Something will happen. For instance, that takeover of land, the Jambanja that happened in Zimbabwe. Mr. Malema is also always alluding to this. If that happens, that would definitely be a disaster for South Africa. It happened in Zimbabwe, and you can see the disaster that it has caused up to now. It is very difficult for the Zimbabweans to use international markets, and it is very difficult for them to function politically in the international. So those are the 5 lessons that I think the South African land reform specifically can learn from. And I think the governments that are ready to do land reform in the Brics should look at the Zimbabwean case because there are very clear lessons that can be learned from there. But that should not deter the government from actually doing this important program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. This is so incisive and very thoughtful. Um, we really appreciate those insights. I'm sure colleagues have taken down some notes to engage you further a little later. Colleagues, without any further ado, I'm going to ask Prof. Joanna Salem to take the floor. Prof, thank you so much for gracing us. We know it's a very, we've got a completely different time zone, and we appreciate that you could make it and just, address this esteemed panel. Thank you. You are on the floor.
Thank you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. And you don't look spooky like Prof. Netsora earlier.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share my slides, and I hope you can see my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So here we go. I'm going to talk about Brazilian land reform, its limits and challenges from the half of the last century until today. My topics are those 4. First, I'm going to talk about land concentration in Brazil, especially the stability of the land concentration since the 60s until today. Then I'm going to talk about land distribution, past and present, and the agrarian reform policies that were defeated, passed in the 60s, and now how the agrarian reform laws, especially what we call the market agrarian reform, function today. Then, thirdly, I'm going to talk about the agrarian reform instruments that Brazilian state have today, even though some government will use it and some government will not. And fourth, last but not least, I will question if does exist an agrarian reforming process in Brazil today. So Brazil had really an agrarian reform process today. Can we call it like that? So starting with some data of the land concentration in Brazil. I know these tables are kind of boring, but I think that they are very useful. This is a table about Brazilian land concentration in 2063, so about 70 years ago. And we have here, about 60 years ago, sorry, we have here that the properties with less than 20 hectares represent 51% of the number of holdings and just 3% of the land area. And the huge landowners with more than 1,000 hectares represent only 1% of the holdings and have 50% of the land area. This is a classic table of land concentration. And if we put together the ownership with less than 50 hectares, we will have that. We will have that 73% of the small ownership occupied only 10% of the land area, and then the 3.4% of the hugest ownership, the latifundis, own 62% of the land. That's 1963. When you talk about 2017, so more than 50 years before, we have a very similar table, a very similar situation in terms of land concentration in Brazil. So putting together all the ownerships with less than 50 hectares, they represent 82% of the holdings and only 12% of land area. And those huge latifundists and big owners with more than 500 hectares, they represent 2% of the number of holdings and almost 60% of land area. So that's a finding that during these 50 years of the second half of the 20th century, that coincided with the years of the most important agrarian reform projects in Latin America, Brazilian concentration of land stayed like almost unchanged. If we make this comparison here, we can see that the land concentration even got worse a little bit. Our rural Gini in Brazil is almost 1. So we have a stable rural Gini, very high, that represent our incredible land concentration that got in 1985 from 0.85 to 0.87. And remembering that the 0 represents perfect equality and 1 represents absolute inequality. So Brazil is very close of absolute inequality in terms of land concentration, and the rural Gini is the proof of it. Also, historical data that is very important to understand the agrarian question in Brazil is that our rural population was majority in our country until the 60s. And from the 60s to the 70s, as happened with a lot of Latin American countries, our urban population started to be the majority of the population, and the rural population started to decrease fastly. And the urbanization process was also a very important process in terms of land concentration, because part of these peasants that were going and fleeing to the cities, searching for better conditions of life, was also fleeing from labor, awful conditions in the rural environment, and from the land concentration and their violent dynamics. Also, this is a Portuguese, but I will translate to you. This is a data that came up in 2020. That is, the agribusiness is white in Brazil. The black people in Brazil, the black owners of land in Brazil, occupy only the half of the area comparing with the white ownership. So, of course, we have a very important class and race inequality in terms of land concentration in our country. That is, unfortunately, a legacy, awful legacy from our slavery system. The land distribution in Brazil, historically, we have a very important agrarian reform project that was presented by the President João Goulart in the 60s, in the beginning of the 60s. João Goulart was elected democratically, and he presented a constitutional reform proposal that would make possible an agrarian reform involving expropriations for government bonds and land parcelling rather than cash payments. And his agrarian reform project indeed had the expropriation possibility, but it would affect only 2% of the landowners that were the landowners with more than 500 hectares. Only 2% of the landowners will be affected by his expropriation project. Still, these landowners were protagonists of and leadership of the 1964 coup d'etat that came to drop João Goulart from the presidency. Then, in our dictatorship from 64 to 85, the dictatorship decreed a land statute that created a land distribution system that was used to instrumentalize poor peasants to expand the agriculture frontier without expropriation private farms and without offering protection or guarantees to these poor peasants that were receiving land in very hostile contexts. The land statute from the dictatorship allowed landowners to expand their farms illegally and at low cost, since the hard work of clearing the land was done by mislead laborers who had been deceived by the military. Then in our democratic transition, this is the president that was responsible for this new conception of agrarian reform that we call the market agrarian reform. And the government announced, it's very clear in this respect, our agrarian reform does not abolish or oppose private property. So this is an agrarian reform that did not have the intent to eliminate land concentration, but only to relieve social conflict in the countryside. By market agrarian reform, I mean an agrarian reform that does not change the property structure, offers land access to a small number of farms, neither benefit landowners with generous compensations, and is also reconciled with agribusiness in defending a commercial monoculture for export in continuous expansion. In addition, this market agrarian reform seeks to reproduce the logic of agribusiness in small-scale family farming, for instance, facilitating the access to technological packets from the agrochemical corporations. In the same context of redemocratization in Brazil, it came up a new social movement that is the biggest social movements of peasants in Latin America. That is also a protagonist in the OCLAC organization and the Via Campesina. That is the MST, the Rural Workers Social Movement. That was the most dynamic social subject in struggling for the agrarian reform in Brazil in the last decades. In the last decades, there was projects of redistribution of land, and that are our data about it. The average number of landless families settled per year of government by this institution called INCRA in this market agrarian reform perspective. So we have the Fernando Henrique government, two governments from 1995 to 2002. He settled basically 67,000 families per year. Then Lula's government from 2003 to 2010 increased this number to almost 80,000 families per year. And then the government of Dilma, unfortunately, had lowered this number and decreased this number to 26,000 families per year. And we can say that it just got worse before 2016, when Dilma Rousseff was impeached and suffered this coup d'etat. So the numbers of agrarian reform were decreasing in terms of land distribution in this century. Our land concentration.
Can I give you 2 more minutes, Prof?
Thank you. The land concentration at the same time continued. So in the last decade, the agribusiness had expanded over the forests, the Amazon forest territory, equivalent to 2 times the territory of Guinea-Bissau's area. We have an agricultural frontier called Mapitoba, that is Maranhão, Piauí, Tocantins, and Bahia, represented in this map. The agricultural border or frontier is now like eating our forests and expanding through many illegal and violent dynamics. To conclude, our agrarian reform instruments today are basically these 4. We have the national program for strengthening of family farming, that are credit programs to small farming. The PRONERA, that is the National Education Program in Agrarian Reform. The PRONAFI was created in 1995, the PRONERA in 1998. The PAA, that is the Food Acquisition Program from 2003. And this last program, the Terra da Gente, or People's Land, from last year, or 2024. The PRONAFI was created in 1995, as I say, and they have many different funding lines, referring to production costs, agro-industry for small farming, credit exclusively for women, support for agroecological systems and for bioeconomy. Also, the program More Food, that it's destined to increase productivity for food production, lines of credit, especially for youth people, for youth and young people, to develop productive activities in rural areas, the microcredit and the cooperatives funding line. Pronera, by his time, from 1998 to 2024, it achieved 192,000 students that are rural workers and peasants in 545 completed courses with partnerships with public universities from all over the country. This is young Brazilian peasants that are accessing the university through this program today in the Federal University of Pelotas, that is in the south of Brazil. Then we have the PA, that is a very important public food purchasing program created in 2003, destining food for public schools and other sectors of the public economy, purchased by the state directly from small producers and agrarian reform settlers. And the beneficiaries are around 5,545 peasants. And the last program aims to accelerate land distribution in public land and benefit 295,000 families by next year, but it's a program still very recent and we have no data about it. Just to finalize my presentation, I want to highlight that the land concentration also coincides with the land owner's power today. And we have this agricultural parliamentary front that have 353 congressmen attached to land property power and very organized to assure their economic interests in the parliament, which includes blocking environmental protection laws, flexibilizing the use of pesticides, and criminalizing social movements in the countryside. And they represent almost 70% of our deputies' chamber. And they have a think tank or lobby institution called Think Agribusiness Institute that is very powerful. We have also a very important pesticides use expansion in Latin America during this century. And just to conclude, I will say that despite the active public instruments of agrarian reform designed to distribute land, finance, and support production through public policies and strengthen peasants and small producers through education, the agribusiness class remains politically and economically dominant in Brazil, and land concentration continues as a structural legacy from colonial times. The available instruments that we have today are not sufficient to correct the unjust distribution of land. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think this is very incisive, and colleagues have been able, I'm sure, to take notes and to draw some parallels, between South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Brazil. I think this is very insightful, and thanks so much for taking time to talk to us. Colleagues, without any further ado, going to call Prof. Victor Mbengwa. He's going to talk about the politics of South African land reform. We've had few comments on that. Prof. Victor, you are on the floor, sir, and all the best.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. I had prepared some slides, but because of the previous speakers, I had to change my mind and speak from my heart. They've actually taken everything that I have prepared. So now I am actually going to talk from my heart. Okay. Now, if we can pause and look at land reform and its landscape, all of us will believe and accept that it is a very complex phenomena, and it required a lot of efforts to make it successful. In my view, this happened also in other countries that are in our region, like SADC. We have seen that land reform had actually destabilize their economy in a large scale. And the second speaker said that, and the first speaker also said that. Okay, just to draw you closer, what actually informs land reform? Maybe taking it from the perspective of the main political players, such as the ANC, and I believe that that is not a contest about that because they've been ruling for some times now, and their position has been very clear. And if we revisit it, we could say that they are actually driven by the construct and the strategy that we could summarize as the NDR, National Democratic Revolution. And that political strategy had some indicators that are very, very important to look closely to. And that to me, and if I have time, and I think I do, I will definitely give you some of those indicators just to refresh. And I know that most of you know those indicators. The transformation of power structures is one of them, and the democratic governance, social and economic justice, and national building and gender equality. These are five indicators of the national democratic revolution, which underpin the power and the direction and the political strategies that seeks to redress or to actually bring freedom in South Africa. And let's also take into account that this national democratic revolution was not accepted by the whole society. It is the progressive forces that have actually embraced it, mainly from the ANC and its alliance, and that becomes a contested terrain. And to come closer to the topic, land reform. How does the national NDR resonate with the land reform, and why it is so important for the national revolution to really be drawn closer to it? And if I look at the correlations of some of the variables that really underpin the land reform, one can say that the land reform was formulated to redress the historical injustice. And I think that he has been also indicated through some presentation on the acts that were established, and also some of the serious programs that the apartheid regime took, and some of the serious build-up to actually protect some of this, and also the education that was also provided to those that are non-whites in South Africa. Okay, now let's go to the promoting social and economic equality. That is also one of the tenets or some of the indicators. And then the other is the national building and reconciliation and empowering of the rural majority. So how does this actually brings us to this kind of discussion? And when we look at the visits by the AfriForum to the United States, one does not really feel that it was not one does not really think that is a small thing, because I think they have spent a lot of money and time to prepare and to lobby behind closed doors and all those things. And at the same time, now you see that the tariffs have been increased to a certain extent, and the AGOA agreements have been threatened, or probably things are actually not going very well in terms of and what is the reason behind that? The reason is as they say, and I think it is well documented, that they say that the expropriation act that has been passed by the president triggered that, and that to me gives me the point that land reform is not going to be easy for us to achieve it. And we know that, because as South Africans, we have actually embraced democracy, not through the barrel of the gun, but through a negotiation settlement. Each one has been given the right, as per the constitution, to really take, to take, to be allowed to participate, and also to be heard, and also to challenge in court. You have seen the zealous of this world, the Malemas, and all those, contesting in the opposite direction. So, in my view, this is a trigger to say that, should we be able to succeed in solving the problem of land and the land ownership, which is not actually taking any pace that is very acceptable and reasonable. Should we be able to solve that, we will have reached a certain level of an outstanding achievement. Okay, what is happening now on the ground? In terms of the programs that have been initiated through land reform, there's been some strikes where we got some estates being reversed or to be distributed to the South Africans. We know there have been those estates. I know that in Limpopo we had a citrus estate that was very, very popular, which was even exporting a lot of citrus product. One of my friends visited there, and I was invited. Unfortunately, I couldn't get there. Visited there, and the report was that the estate is actually going down, and that is just one example. So the strategy is that when the black people get this kind of assets, it must not they must not work. And how do they achieve that? Before the redistribution or the ending of the title deed, those white owners will actually plan to destroy every assets and every kind of infrastructure that is in. And so that when the government tries to inject some certain funds and all those things, the government will have a fatigue to say that we cannot be able to finance these people. And if we go, as also in the cases of the CPAs, the community property association, you get the same trend, where you find that people are actually given large tracts of land, and at the same time, if they don't cooperate with the previous owners, then what happens is that the previous owners will actually destroy and make all those properties to be dysfunctional for a certain period, knowing very well that the arrangement that has been done in order to take that land is not as the same as the land ownership, the land reform that was done by the Afrikaners. The Afrikaners were giving land for free, but in South Africa, you get land. And there is a balance of payments that you have to do through either land bank and other commercial banks. And if you don't produce to that extent where you get surplus or profit, it is possible that that land can also be repossessed, and that is the situation that is happening in the land reform space at the current moment. But there are those.
I think you can. We left it 1 minute. You can try to conclude. Okay.
Thank you. So there are those that have been smart to actually give some cooperation with the previous owners and therefore and release the land and get some show funds and all those kind of things in terms of rental and all those things. Because of the time, I cannot go as far as some of the things that I wanted to say, but I think we can share some of these experiences as we get to the questions and the answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think now we're going to have Professor Maponya. Prof, are you here? He's going to be our fourth speaker. He's talking about the current and the potential land used for agricultural purposes. Prof Maponya.
I think he has muted himself, I think, probably.
Is he still here?
Hello, Zama, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Yes,
and can you see the presentation?
Not as yet.
Can you see it?
But we can see you now.
The presentation, you can see it now.
Not as yet, unless if other colleagues can see it, but I can't see it as yet.
Okay.
Something is coming, yes, we can see it now.
Let's see. Okay.
Colleagues, anyone who has questions, please do write them down. We're going to take them. We left with one speaker, and then we're going to discuss, have question and answers.
Okay, you can see it. Can I continue? Thank you very much, Zama, and the previous speakers. My presentation is going to be very quick because most of the information were discussed by the previous speakers. I'm going to more concern or more. I'll be prioritizing the issue of land use, and as you know that the South Africans will agree with me that we have the department that is specifically responsible for your land reform, your rural development. And they had some land reform programs, like your land redistribution, your restitution, your delayed tenure. So my base is that in the previous years, the programs were there, but when we are on the ground, you see so many challenges, like Professor Mbekwa has just mentioned, the issue of Zebediela in Limpopo. So it's a lot of them. So mine is that what is the land use? If you give communities that land, are they able to use it properly? So today I just want to give you some approach that I'm currently using that I think it is very critical for the beneficiary of reform to follow and our government officials. So I'm going to start with a short introduction. What is the criteria that we can use or is being used for land suitability, so that the right land is given to the right people and the usage is very correct. And some examples per province, and the index, strategically located land index, that is being used in order to identify land potential and the land use. And I'm going to give you some practical example from the project that I've been able to manage. Example one, where you can see how we identify the land use and how we identify the potential at the commercial, smallholder, subsistent, where at the homestead, and also the climatic criteria. The strategically located land index is using those three criteria: the climatic, environment, and the socio-economic, which I think is very important before one get land, so that we are sure about this thing. Quickly, the country's land use is heavily dominated by agricultural activities, where around 80% of the country total is around 80% of the total land area. But only 11% has arable potential for cultivation. For example, cultivation of crops. Majority is being used for grazing. And other land categories, you can be your grassland, your shrubland, your woodland, and forest. We are seeing the trend now in South Africa, where also land within the forest is now being used by the community for agricultural production, income generation, and food security. So things are changing as we speak, and this is just a summary where you can see the percentage total of land from your residential, commercial, industrial. You can see agriculture, there is 11.3%, and others is for grazing, your grasslands, your wetlands, your plantation forest. Quickly, when I continue, the SLLI, that's the one that I'm using, which I think is very critical. When we are on the ground, when you ask our government officials that before you allocate or before you distribute, you give our communities land, what is it that you use? What is the approach that you are using, so that we make sure that things go smoother? So some of this index are not being used. So I thought today, let me just present it so that we should understand it, which serves as a resource in South Africa for the identification and the assessment of land appropriate for diverse applications. For land reform, is very critical to use this kind of index, because you will be able to cover your climatic and environmental criteria. You'll be able to cover your socio-economic criteria. And then the 8 is very important, because it is a product of land by taking into account very characteristics and the influence on particular activities such as agriculture. You know, you are able to identify land that is well suited. In this case, for your land reform efforts, particularly in the agricultural sector. I say these are the 3 musketeers, because the criteria includes your environment and physical, where you must be sure about your environment and physical before you allocate land to an individual. As you know, most of the individuals or our community that we allocate land, they don't have farming experience. So some of these things they don't know. That is why you see their land use is basically at the lowest. Your climatic role, agriculture involves a lot of climate. Your socio-economic is very critical also to do such kind of assessment, so that it don't do the issue of market issues. I try to go to the next slides. Okay. And it is frequently utilized along GIS and multi-criteria decision to support decision-making based on evidence. And this kind of index is very critical. It ranges from 0 to 100, where a value close to 0 implies unstrategically located land. You can't allocate land for production. And then those that ranges close to 100 is highly strategic land to establish farming project, because it satisfies those 3 criteria: your physical environment, and also your socio-economic. The second slide. This is just the criteria for that usage. That is the group. Your environment physical, your climate criteria must be online. The socio-economic criteria must also be there, so that we are able to say this land is highly suitable, or this land is moderate to suitable, or is unsuitable, or marginal or unsuitable. Most of the time, you find that people are being given land that is not suitable for agricultural production or for a particular crop in that particular area. So it's very important for this kind of thing to be done before any land allocation. This is just a table that shows how is it. And this is an example of land use per province. This is from the report. This is the latest report from HSRC, Human Rights Research Council, that emphasizes the issue of food security at a household level, saying South Africa at a household level, we are very much food insecure. But Limpopo is the most province where most of land is being used for agriculture. You can see Limpopo and so forth and so forth. And this is just to say which province grow things better. You can see grains, sugars, forests, vegetables in Mpumalanga, different colors. It's a general thing, but I'm going to go zoom. I'm going to give you examples that I used based on these things. So this is an example of strategically allocated index. That issue of say from 0 to 10, it means the land is not suitable. Those are different colors. The greener ones, the land is very suitable for maybe agricultural, it can be for your livestock and your crop. This is a first example of a project that I undertook, where before we assist them, we allocate land, we need to find out what type of a crop grows there. This is an example of a cabbage and spinach production. You can see the whole country, this 14 district, where it says that in this particular area, cabbage is suited if you said it's green, or maybe it's marginal where it's purple. So you are able to assist those farmers, even when you procure seeds for them or seedlings. You know that in this area, cabbage can grow, or in this area, you have these particular fruits can grow. Because so far on the ground, we find that our community, they don't know. You know, you just plant grapes in some part of Limpopo where it cannot grow. While we know the Western grape, it grows better. So this is some practical example that we are using. And we can also use the same approach at the subsistence level. This is at the homestead level. This is an example of Gauteng province, all the township of Gauteng, where you take coordinates. You have well plotted, and you can see cabbage in which area grows better. Is it suitable in this area? Is it marginal in this area? Unsuited. It means you can't grow cabbage, but you find that tomato can grow better. So we did such kind of approaches in all the vegetables, in all the fruits, all grains. We have this kind of reports that enable us to support our people much better. So you have this kind of the climatic career that I was telling to you. This is just an example that shows that we need to know the issue of rainfall, because rainfall is very critical for agricultural production. That which area the rainfall is high, which is whether it's high, whether it's low. So you can see the rainfall belt, the blue ones. Those are the agroforestry that we are seeing in the country, and those other ones, they are normal areas for agricultural production. So it's very important to have an idea, because each crop, it needs a different climate or rainfall to grow. So when we are on the ground, we find out the communities that don't know, they were just given land. And that's the problem. So this is another example. For those that are doing livestock, you find that they don't even know their livestock unit, the grazing capacity. You are being given land, and the rainfall is low, and you can see that the grazing capacity is low. Your LSU, if it's that 1.5 to between 3.5, for example, is just determined in this area, this kind of livestock, this weight of livestock can grow here. Your bromara, you can keep a bromara in this kind of 1 hectare because of your LSU. That is between maybe 7 and 10. But if your LSU is at 1.5 and 3.5, you find out bromara cannot maybe survive. We're going to have a problem with the grazing cover. So such things there, we need to inform our communities before we allocate land. This is just an example that the work that I did. Some forest organization and from some government department, that before you do, let the people know their grazing capacity. Let them know, so that they must know which livestock weight can survive on their farm. This is example again.
1 minute,
This you can
sorry,
see.
Doc.
1 minute.
1
Yeah,
minute.
no, I'm
Yes.
wrapping up. This is, for example, the Western Cape. So we are spreading this kind of information. You can also do the normalized differentiation where we study the greenness of the vegetation. Communities must be aware of this approach before we give them land. You can see this is the work that we have done. In conclusion, I think based on the surveys that I'm currently doing on the ground in the whole country, I can safely say agriculture continues to be an important use of land. The overall external cultural land, but it's relatively small, but it's very important that the index is not a complete situation for land acquisition and land use, but it ensures that the right, appropriate, and sustainable land parcels are obtained. And also, it serves as an effective instrument for advancing evidence-based land use management decisions. And it can be utilized to facilitate the enforcement of legislation like your land reform issues. And hence, there's an increasing focus on sustainable land use practices, which must encompass the integrated planning and the application of science and technology to enhance land management and ensure food security for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doc. We're going to be having our last speaker, which is Dr. Ali Roshani from Iran. We also, colleagues, please do prepare your question where we started from the Zimbabwe lessons that we got from Prof, and also the politics side, and then also lessons from Brazil. So now we're going to be having just a few brief on the Iran part from Dr. Roshani. You may please take the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and distinguished guests. It's a great honor to participate in this important webinar and share with you some of reflection on Iran experience with land reform. I could not upload my file. The presentation title is Experiences of Land Reforms in Iran. Actually, I am a director of Golestan Agricultural and Natural Resources Research Center in Gorgan, located in northern part of Iran. Land reform, as everybody knows, referred to fundamental changes in the ownership and utilization of agricultural land, usually aimed at increasing productivity, ensuring social justice, and promoting rural development. In principle, the land reform program that was implemented in Iran should be considered one of the five important events of the 28th century in Iran. Land reform refers primarily to a series of state-led efforts in 1960s, especially under Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, to redistribute agricultural land from feudal landlords to peasant farmers. And by the early 1970s, the program has redistributed millions of hectares of land and affected a significant portion of Iran's rural population. If we studied that historical background, there is two different background, different stages. Before land reform, Iran had a feudal agrarian system. A small number of landlords owned vast area of land, while the majority of rural population were tenant farmers or sharecroppers. Tenants often gave up to 70% of their crop yield to landlord. And that reform has been necessary because of political pressure for modernization and rural development, social unrest due to rural inequality, and influence of the US and World Bank, especially during Cold War, encouraging reforms to prevent communist influence. We can describe that reform in three main stages. The first, when that law has been approved in 1962 under the white revolution of the Shah and the people. Landlords were forced to sell surplus land, and landless peasants were allowed to purchase it, often through government support. And during 1964, 1971, continued that the redistribution, landlords receive a compensation and the land was sold to the farmer. And in third stages, the creation of agricultural cooperative to support new landlords has been happened. The main objective of land reform, which has been done in Iran, was where break the power of traditional land owning, improve rural living standard, increase agricultural productivity, reduce social inequality, and curb communist influence, creating purchasing power for farmer, and also creation of a new social stratification in villages, finding a market for urban industrial product, preventing a peasant revolution, increasing the stability of the political structure, and finally using rural manpower in urban industries. The result and consequences can be divided in two different points. In positive outcome, yes, land reform helped break the feudal system and gave land ownership to near about 2 million families. But in negative or controversial effect, it was reform were implemented rapidly and without sufficient support for infrastructure, credit, training, or cooperative system. The fragmented farm often too small for efficient production, and decline in agricultural productivity in some areas has been seen. And many peasants sold their land due to poverty, leading to the urban migration. And legacy and criticism, if we talk about that in this point of view, historians and economics are divided. Some praise it as a revolutionary reform that broke the feudal structure, but others criticize its poor execution, lack of infrastructure, and the way it was used to consolidate the Shah's power. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution, some additional land reform efforts were introduced under Islamic Republic, including redistribution of lands seized from felling landlords. However, despite the importance of the issue and the numerous studies that have been conducted on this issue by Iranian and foreign researchers, there is still some misunderstanding about it that will take time to address. But in my point of view, and in my opinion, this event was a social necessity that had to be implemented, and the reason for it was the oppression and injustice that was practiced by the majority of landowners against their subject.
Therefore, sorry, 1 minute. Can you please wrap up for us?
Yes. What you say?
No, I'm saying you can wrap up. We left it 1 minute.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes.
I want to say only the last part. The main shortcoming and problem of Iran land reform can be listed in 8 different. The neglecting the issue of water. In that time, the land reform has been that water has been neglected. The ownership of the most important limiting factor, the water, and this is the problem. The failure to determine the purpose of some important production structure in rural area also is the constraint, and introduction of the land reform program into endowment land also creating some problem. The inadequacy rural cooperatives in filling the gap of the owner and the most important supporter of agricultural production in village was the exclusion of squatter and agricultural workers. It was also the problem, insufficient attention to empowering the organs and members of rural cooperatives also, and insufficient land allocation among farmers. This was the problem. Intensification and acceleration of nomadic settlement also was the problem. Coming to the conclusion, the land reform in Iran weakened feudal landlord and create a class of smallholder. However, due to land defragmentation and lack of government support, it did not lead to sustainable agriculture. There was modest improvement in peasant, but no significant economic. As a result, while social equity improved, in some areas, agricultural efficiency has been declined. Today, Iran is continue to address land use challenges through integrated rural development strategy, and land tenure security, environmental conservation, and adaptation to climate change are no key concern. And among them, the importance of linking land redistribution with support services, the need for a strong institution, and the value of participatory approaches that empower local. I believe that in the context of Brics cooperation, sharing this kind of experience can contribute to common effort toward rural transformation, poverty alleviation, and food security. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that insightful information on Iran. I think, colleagues, that's where we end the webinars with our speakers. And I think let's open the platform for question and answers. If you have any question regarding the matter, this is where now we'll be able to take questions. Is there anyone? Okay, you can unmute yourself, Tando. Are you able to unmute yourself, Tando? Okay, I have Dr. Soraya. You can come through.
I think I'm unmuted. I think I'm unmuted.
Oh, okay. Okay, Tando, you can go through.
I just want to thank everyone who has delivered a good presentation here. I just want to know if Professor Motsana is still here.
If Professor?
Professor Netswera.
Oh, you have a question for?
Yes, please.
Okay, you can.
Is he still here?
If I don't think he's still here because he was attending another meeting, but other colleagues, they can also respond if it's particularly about the land reform, if they are able.
Okay, let me then base my question on Professor Salem, Joanna.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your taking us through what had transpired in is it Cuba? Brazil.
He's from Brazil.
Yeah,
She's
yes,
from
it's
Brazil, yes.
Yes. I have been a student of agriculture, Prof, and the deliberations today really take one to ponder. Number one, land reform not being an easy process. We have seen what took place in Zimbabwe and other countries. Number two, the success stories in Brazil. How did you do the intergovernmental relations? I am basing my question on the following. In South Africa, we've got the research councils, and some of the matters that they deal with are common, like climate change. And also we've got student passes, student funding that students use through these research councils to deal with the same issues that are interconnected and intertwined. So I just want to find out from Brazil on the success stories, more so from what the last speaker had said, that there was no economic production growth related success stories that came out of Iran. Although some of the peasant farmers did receive the land pockets, but that didn't translate to the economic development, and which worries me a great deal. That here in South Africa, billions of rands have been spent, but there is little movement towards the economic transformation. Your success stories and how you went about pulling resources and issues and intergovernmental relations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tandok. Colleagues, I think Dr. Soraya can also ask a question, and then after Dr. Soraya, Professor Nasreen as well, and then the speakers, they can take down the questions. Professor Pacho is back also, he will continue with the platform. Thank you. Dr. Soraya, you can go through.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's more comment than maybe a question, but it's a comment that any of the speakers can please respond to. Particularly, Prof. Maponia's presentation gives us a very good overview of how we should roadmap the land issue in our country. And many of the speakers have spoken of how it has not given the desired results. So my comment for South Africa is that we should really take cognizance of these presentations, and particularly the one on Prof. Mponia, when we tackle the land issue, because otherwise we set our people up for failure, because the land is not equipped for what we think they should do on it. And we cannot build an ideology that we're going to give land back as if it's like giving a house. A land is a different thing, and we've seen how it needs processes and checkings before. And I would like us to take cognizance of it in our South African context. I know I'm not, my field is not agriculture or land. My field is human rights. So I'm always piqued by interest on rights. So the rights to land in South Africa has been very precarious, and it hasn't happened as it should. So I think there are a lot of lessons to learn how we can take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. You can go through, Dr. Nasreen.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you to all the presenters for a most informative presentation. For me personally, I think that from the South African paradigm, the question of land reform architecture is much more loaded than the SDGs, much more loaded than climate security, and so forth. Arising from the political madness of what we experienced during the colonial apartheid legislative eras, and coupled with a whole lot of other things that were imposed upon South Africans, land reform becomes a much more crucial question. And for those colleagues in South Africa on this particular issue, it has occupied the agenda for a number of years now. However, specifically after making that comment to Prof. Maponya, I am most interested in understanding the agrarian aspects of securing and ensuring that we have a sustainable system that delivers food. And that then extends itself, in my mind at least, of course I'll take guidance from you because you're the expert in agriculture, see how it is a social justice in terms of food security is brought forward. I'm not speaking about communal practices just alone. I'm speaking also about the extension of mentoring, of having programs where we are able to teach and we are able to pass on knowledge and share knowledge on the seasonal cycles, on the rotational cycles, and not just subsistence farming itself. So I'm interested to hear, Prof. Maponya, how it is that you view that and how it is that we can have that taken up within the South African paradigm. When you piggyback on that as well, there's also the question of mixed farming, mixed agrarian practices, looking at grazing the one season and then looking at reforming the ecosystem and in the third season growing, preparing for crops and so on. So I'll pause there for now. And thank you, colleagues, for a most informative session.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nasreen. I'm not sure if the presenters had your question very well, but just be on the standby in case, because your audio was not very strong. Just be on the standby in case they want to make a follow-up. I'm going to ask Dr. Mandla to take us through. Dr. Mandla Mbecha.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Mandla. My question is directed to Professor Goodwill Mukombe. Prof, you said that South Africa should avoid taking policies like Jambaja policy, which might lead to issues of violence. And but if you see, like the South African government for the past 30 years have tried some diplomatic approach in terms of land ownership policies. And early this year, on the 20, I think 20 January, the President Cyril Ramaphosa approved a bill which allowed the expropriation of land without compensation. And then through that, we've seen a reaction towards the US based on the Prof, what's your view on this? Which is the good approach which you can suggest to deal with the issues of land? Because if we come up with the approach of the policy approach, we ended up look like it's an attack to a certain race. So I just want to get your view, Prof, based on this, and what do you think we can do? And also, do you think the policy can work, or it will just be there, just like the other failed policy they will implement? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Doc. I'm going to check if Dr. Sizambegi is also on able to ask questions.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay, now I want us to effectively look first on the issue of the Land Act that was passed. It's
Please
called the Land
introduce
Native
yourself,
Act.
Dr. Caesar.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Sisambegi. I am a lecturer here at the Department of Quantity Surveying and Construction Management here in DUT Steve Biko campus. I am a PhD candidate, but I'm gracefully receiving the conferred PhD by the speaker. Thank you so much. Right, let me be very fast. The Land Act of 1913 and its impact in the natives of South Africa, more especially the way it was done and things that were done. If you would remember, before the Land Act was passed, Black people were living communally together, and the land was actually owned by the chiefs, and people were given the land as in when they then request to use that land. Some of the people, more especially in the places like Eastern Cape and Limpopo, that is where the fertile or the Arabic land is, would request to purchase a land for a use that is exclusive. And such process, for an example, would be then regarded, more especially, remember there was this church mission program where people would be sold land in pursuit of the missions to build churches and the like. Now, if you would remember, the consequences of the act, the Black South Africans were forcefully removed from the productive land and pushed into the overcrowded and underdeveloped reserves. And that also marked the beginning of the institutionalized land dispossession, laying the ground for the apartheid system to then become fertile. And also, if you recall, the economic livelihoods of these Black natives were destroyed, leading to the increased poverty, landlessness, and dependence, and most especially dependent on the white farmers who came and also purchased the land like anybody else. Now, what I want to ask as a question that is agitating the presentation that we just listened to now is this: to what extent, and I want to ask this to, is it Maponya, Prof. Maponya, because I think I liked how he spaced or how he pieced around through his presentation the different sectors and different types of soils or land and its uses and where these lands are found and what crops and what sort of activities that could be taking place in those particular lands, so that we know how the restitution. Now, the question is this: to what extent has South Africa's land restitution program effectively addressed the injustices of forcefully removals of the natives under the apartheid law that was passed? And what policies or legal frameworks or even structured reforms that are needed to accelerate the meaningful redress and restoration for the affected communities as a result of the Land Act that was passed? I think that is where I would stop for now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate. I think, colleagues, we have one last question, but not least from Dr. Zungu. Dr. Zungu, you're here in less than 2 minutes, please. Dr. Zungu, yes, go ahead. You're on the floor.
I think his mic is still mute. His mic is still mute. You can see his mic, and I think is mute by the system, not even by himself. I think so.
Zama, you want to unmute Dr. Zungu so we can hear
I think we
him?
unmuted everybody, but
Okay.
if he can't, we have his question on the chat. If he can unmute himself. Lily tried to unmute everybody. I think the question was, given that 72% of the land in South Africa, is it not owned is not owned by the majority of its citizens, it is possible that valuable underground resources such as gold are also not under the country's control.
Okay, and that question is directed to?
I think maybe it's directed to any speaker who's able to respond, I think.
We can
I
give
don't know
it
if
to Prof.
material,
Victor.
so it's
Prof. Victor Mbengwa can take that.
okay.
Colleagues, I'm going to allow you at least 3 minutes per speaker to go through the questions that have been, I know we don't have enough time, but we're completely out of time. But just 3 minutes to just address the questions that were raised, and you are able to tackle them for us. Which order are we going to follow, Zama? In the same order that the colleagues were speaking? Is that in good order?
I think the first one was for Brazil, Dr. Salim. She got the first question. I think after her, then we can just proceed with any order.
Dr. Salim?
If she still remember her question.
She does.
Yes, I do. Are you
Yes.
listening to me? Great.
Good.
So can I start?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So the question directed to Brazilian issues had two central aspects that I miss in my first presentation. That are the intercultural relations and agrarian reform, the first one, and the second, the climate change challenge. About the intercultural relations in Brazil and the agrarian land distribution conflicts, we can say that there are special legislation to demarc indigenous territories, and in Brazil today we have more than 500 indigenous territories that are already demarcated, and 200 of those indigenous territories that are still in a long process of demarcation. And it's a very important conflict because, of course, the indigenous people in Brazil deserve much more than the land they have, but they are not under the agrarian reform law because the indigenous territory have a totally different approach and different law protection in respect to the agrarian reform settlers, for example. Indigenous territories are not allowed, for example, to cultivate in commercial monocultural model, and that's a way of protecting their traditional ways of production. And well, it's a different legislation that that organize this issue. And also we have the quilombos. In Brazil, we have more than 8,000 territories demarcated as quilombos that are designated to the Black community that had their African ancestors victims of slavery. And that's also a continuous struggle. So there is a special legislation for the quilombolas and how they organize their communitarian territories. And the indigenous territories, as the quilombos territories, are one of the central struggles in terms of popular perspectives of the use of the land. And they are not exactly under the same situation of the agrarian reform that are more capitalist. I mean, the agrarian reform in Brazil, as a market agrarian reform, had capitalist rules. And we can say that indigenous territories and quilombos have more communitarian approaches. Indeed, there are alliances among organizations like the Quilombolas Association and the articulation of Brazilian indigenous people that are huge and important and representative associations of these people. And they are also connected to MST and other social movements that struggle for agrarian reform, but they have different specific demands. About the climate change, I would just repeat something that I had fastly said before. That is, yes, there are important public policies on, for example, agroecological incentives, in PRONAFI, that is the Small Farmers Public Credit Program. So there are public credit lines specifically to agroecological production. There are also public purchases programs where state just purchase from agroecological productions of small farms and communities and settlers of agrarian reform. And also there are in PRONERA, that is the Education on Agrarian Reform program, education on agroecological techniques and alliances between universities and these social movements, that agroecological social movements that need to access universities and build new knowledge on these techniques. So despite these strategic and very important public policies that we have in Brazil, as I said, agribusiness is still dominant and in the Brazilian economy and also in the political power. So we are still confronting the expansion of the agricultural frontier in terms of expansion of pesticides and of very nocive use and anti-ecological use of our land that unfortunately is what is predominant today. Thank you.
Prof, excellent. Colleagues, can I ask Prof Magombe? You're still here, Prof Magombe?
Yes, I'm here. The question was regarding what South Africa can do in order to avoid the Chambanja situation. This is a very important question because definitely at all costs that Chambanja situation in Zimbabwe it could have been avoided in Zimbabwe, but it should be avoided in South Africa. The way to go about it is to go like the South African government did, to go in an open way about reaching the decision for expropriation. Because definitely the Chambanja situation will be the result of a delay of slow speed of redistribution, which is what is happening right now. Both restitution and redistribution are not happening at the pace at which they are expected to do. And expropriation can lead to that speed. But it must be done openly and there must be legal recourse. The courts will be very busy. The South African government, I think, is taking the correct steps to avoid this situation. But it is still moving slowly. And that slow movement, say from 1994 to now, should be avoided. The second thing is that after achieving that expropriation, like the last speaker said, there must be a method of making sure that economic benefits are transferred from the current white minority to the blacks. And that transfer requires a transfer of knowledge from the farmers, the current commercial farmers, to the black majority. And that transfer is what is very difficult. It is very easy to do the political objectives of funding expropriation, which is legally acceptable. And I think the government is taking steps towards that. But what is more difficult, like also Prof. Maponya indicated, is that to transfer the economic benefits after the expropriation is very difficult. So the government should not only aim to do expropriation and acquire the land and redistribute it to achieve the political objective, but they should also have some way of coaxing the knowledge out of the white farmers right now and to the black farmers. There are ways to do it. One involves a gradual transfer, like for instance, land can be owned by both farmers, and in the first year, 10% goes to the black farmers and 80% goes to the farmer, and it gradually reduces until 0 goes to the white farmer and 100% goes to the black farmer. In that process, the farmers will learn. Here in Limpopo, we have cases of farms that were really economically productive, that if nothing happening in them. That is not the results that the government wants. Thank you very much.
Okay, colleagues, I think that's a very excellent response, Prof. I'm going to the next speaker who came after you. It's going to be Prof. Mbemwa. Prof.
Sorry, I did not hear the question very well. Can the speaker or Zama, are you the one who asked the question?
It was me. No, it wasn't
Eh?
me.
It
No,
was
it
who?
wasn't me, Prof. No.
Who asked the question? Because I did not really get the question. I just heard when the question was allocated that it's allocated to me. So can someone just give me the question?
Yes, the question, Prof, is the one on the chart that said, given South Africa's 72% of land in South Africa is not owned by the majority of its citizens, is it possible that valuable underground resources, such as gold, are also not under the country's control?
That one is obvious. It's obvious. I think if we know the history, the Anglo-Americans and all those other conglomerates are actually the ones that are owning most of those kind of resources, and probably it's a debate that could be advanced at another level. But obviously, it's a cause of concern, and it shows that there is a justifiable reason why there was a political program to actually start looking at those issues in order to ensure that South Africans who are deprived are actually given their wealth back and their dignity. This is actually another revolution that may be coming through another form. But I think that as the latter professor said, South Africans are able to approach these sensitive and contagious issues of land reform in a more pragmatic and systematic way, such that I think, although quite very slow, the resources and the economy will be shared. And I have that hope that one day or our grandchildren will be able to enjoy these resources without having to struggle to the extent that we are. Thank you. I don't know if I've answered the question. Is there someone who could give me that indication?
Prof. Pacho, are you still here?
Yes. Yes. Sorry, colleagues. I just had some interruption right here. Sorry about that. The next, thanks, Prof. I think it's a very proper response, befitting. Then last one, colleagues, we going to ask, before the last one, Dr. Maponya, there were a lot of comments around your talk.
Thank you very much for the comments, and I think I can just summarize some of them. That in South Africa, basically, we are very lucky because we have case studies. We have the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform that had started with land reform programs. Your land restitution is there. Your land redistribution program is there, your land channel. So we are able to learn from the failures, and we can also vis-a-vis what is happening on the ground. So the progress, I think, I was asked about the progress. If you look at those program of government and vis-a-vis what is on the ground, I'm not convinced. You hear people saying there's 25% transfer of land to the blacks. Yes, there's transfer, but what is it that is on the ground? You see white elephant all over. There's no skill among our people. People who are just given land. You ask yourself the selection criteria, or if you give community, why can't they select somebody with passion on agricultural product? Because agriculture itself is science. From your soil testing, if you don't know what is underground, what is it? So how are you going to plant? Because things have changed. We're talking climate change, and we still have those communities that don't have that kind of skill. And the case studies of the Department of Rural Development Land Reform programs, it's very clear that we are moving in a very snail pace. We have big projects that collapsed. Those who are South Africans, they know this week what happening at Daybreak Poultry, where more than 200,000 of the chickens were killed, not because of anything, but because of the feeding program. SPSA found that the chicken were not well fed because people don't understand the feeding program. But you can imagine that kind of operation. So it's happening all over the country. The issue of skill is not there. That is why we need to identify those things before we allocate land. Otherwise, we're just going to allocate land to our communities, but the skill is a problem. We don't have youth. The other thing is young people participation in these agricultural programs. Programs should be tailor-made to attract youth by the government. That is not happening. All those programs that you see from the Department of Rural Development, if you do assessment and you'll see less than 5% of participation, not youth, being older than 60 upwards. So you can't talk sustainability. Those projects will just collapse. So the progress, people are saying is there, but I'm always on the ground. And then when I look at the programs of government and what is on the ground, it's not convincing. I mean, we also now, you hear HSRC reports saying, emphasize that South Africa at a household level, we are food insecure. There's no food. People cannot feed themselves. So we have a serious problem. That's why I said maybe this kind of approach, it can work, so that we identify the right people with passion, we skill them, we monitor them, we give them the right skill, right land, and they know about their climatic conditions, the environment around them, because of those kind of climate issues. We link them to the markets. That's what is needed. But in the past, that thing was not happening. And I'm afraid that if we continue like this, the land reform program, as we've seen with the current land reform programs of government, is not going to stand the test of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc. Colleagues, that's a very compelling response from Dr. Maponya. Our last but not least respondent is Dr. Ali Roshani. Doc? Dr. Ali?
Yes, sir.
You are on the floor.
What's the question?
If there's no question, you can just give us your parting shot. I'm sure I've missed one or two things, your reflections on this.
Actually, I should say thank you to give me such a opportunity to be there in this webinar, but the thing which I should introduce and the importance of linking the land distribution. Anywhere, any country want to redistribute the land, they should see the support services and they make that a strong institution. And I mean, the problem which we had in Iran. In a short time, we distributed millions of hectares of land among the farmers without any support services, without any strong institution. That's why we got the decline in our productivity. I think any country which want to do that redistribution, they should never repeat our mistake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc. I think that, colleagues, concludes our discussion. And mine is just really to thank you so much. And before you go, Zama is asking that we all open our cameras. She wants to take a picture for her marketing. We are completely out of time, colleagues. I would have loved to have everyone asking questions and engaging, but we are completely out of time. But to thank all the speakers, we need cameras for everybody, not only speakers, colleagues, for everyone who is attending. We want to.
I think our cameras are not automated on your side, so I think they are still restricted.
Okay.
Mine is
Sorry,
restricted,
sorry,
for an
please.
example.
Thank you so much, Zama.
Mine is also restricted.
That's your
Okay.
baby.
Mine is
Okay, let me-
also restricted. Soraya.
Okay. Okay, I think now it's fine. Ifan, are you ready?
No,
Yeah.
no, it's still restricted for me.
Still restricted.
I mean, it's disabled.
There we go.
Ah,
Thank you.
there we go.
Oh, so it's the network. Sorry, colleagues. It's slow.
Yeah.
Ifan, are you ready?
We have a camera lady ready.
Ifan, are you here? Okay, let me switch off
We-
my camera so that I can
We've
take.
been
Lily,
smiling
can
for
you
too
also
long.
Shall I take a
Sorry.
screenshot?
Smiling for too long.
Yes, please take a screenshot.
Okay.
For all the slides. Colleagues, just 1 minute smile. Lily, please do tell us once you're done.
We've been smiling. Cameras are not our friend.
I'm trying to figure out how I can see everyone. 1 second, large gallery.
Just take different, like slide 1, slide 2, slide 3.
Yes.
Together.
Let me switch off my camera so I can take a picture.
1 second. Okay.
We are nearly there,
Hey.
colleagues. Sorry.
I'm standing like a zombie now.
Yo, man. Wow.
I've taken one. Have you taken any, Sama?
Yes, I did.
Good.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
colleagues.
good. Thank you.
It was a good session. Thank you,
We're
Kari.
dealing with the issue of land. Yeah, it's the issue of land.
Serious
Yes.
matters.
Okay, colleagues, thank you so much. I really appreciate and have a beautiful day.
Thank
forward.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. All the best. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, colleagues. Bye.
Bye, bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Prof.